Daniel Pierce was the kind of man who turned heads wherever he went. In his early 40s, tall, sharp, and always dressed in tailored suits, he wasn't just any CEO, he was the CEO. His company ran some of the biggest philanthropic initiatives in the country. But despite his success, he had a reputation for being emotionally distant. To him, people were numbers, efficiency was everything, and business left no room for weakness. That was until the day he noticed her. Emily Carter. She was nothing like the executives who usually filled Daniel's orbit. In her early 30s, with shoulder-length light brown hair often tied back in a messy bun, Emily worked quietly at one of the lowest desks in his company. She was a temp, a fill-in assistant from an agency, answering phones, typing reports, and sorting endless files. Her pay barely covered rent, so when the office lights went off at night, Emily didn't go home. She changed clothes and started her second shift, waitressing at a small diner across town. But even in the middle of exhaustion, Emily carried herself with a quiet strength. And one afternoon, Daniel saw it with his own eyes. He walked past the open-floor office just as a senior manager was belittling one of the junior staff for making a small mistake. Most people looked down, too afraid to speak. But not Emily. She stood up from her cubicle, her voice steady, her eyes unflinching. "Everyone makes mistakes," she said firmly. "What matters is how we help them fix it, not how loudly we embarrass them." The room went silent. The manager flushed red. And Daniel froze. No one ever talked like that in his company. Especially not a temp worker. For the first time in years, Daniel Pierce was caught off guard. And what he didn't know yet was that this moment, this small act of courage, would be the beginning of a story that would change both of their lives forever. But Daniel's surprise was only the beginning. Because fate wasn't finished weaving their paths together, not by a long shot. The next week, Emily's name appeared on Daniel's schedule. Not because she had requested it, but because Daniel himself had. He needed extra hands on a charity initiative his company was sponsoring, a health and wellness fundraiser. Normally, he would have asked a full-time staffer, but something about Emily had stuck with him. The way she stood her ground, the quiet confidence beneath her modest appearance, it intrigued him. At first, Emily was hesitant. "Why me?" she asked when her supervisor handed her the assignment. "Because the boss said so," came the reply. So, Emily found herself working side by side with the billionaire CEO himself. She kept her head down, typing reports, organizing schedules, managing calls. She was efficient, but what struck Daniel wasn't her speed, it was her warmth. The way she treated everyone, from interns to executives, with the same level of kindness. The way people seemed to instantly trust her. From the very first day working on the project, Daniel noticed what set her apart. While most people tried to impress him with numbers, presentations, and polished pitches, Emily focused on people. She remembered the names of every volunteer. She listened to their stories. She spoke with a warmth that made even the most nervous intern feel at ease. And somehow, in the middle of managing spreadsheets, supplies, and scheduling, she still found time to make everyone feel valued. Daniel, who had built his empire on efficiency and precision, couldn't ignore how her approach worked just as well, if not better. For the first time in years, he caught himself admiring someone not for their ambition, but for their humanity. And then came the moment that changed everything. At one of the charity's weekend events, families and children from the community were invited to attend. Daniel was making his rounds, shaking hands, giving polite smiles, when out of nowhere, a small figure darted past him. Emily's son, full of energy, came running across the park, not watching where he was going. Before anyone could react, he collided straight into Daniel's legs, nearly knocking himself over. Daniel bent down, steadying the boy with both hands. For a moment, the billionaire CEO and the 8-year-old boy just stared at each other. Daniel's usual stiff, guarded expression softened in that instant. Jacob looked up at him with wide eyes and said, "Whoa, you're tall." For the first time in a long while, Daniel laughed. A real, genuine laugh. The sound startled even him. Emily rushed over, embarrassed. "Jacob, I'm so sorry, Mr. Pierce." He didn't mean, but Daniel shook his head, still smiling. "It's fine. He's got a strong run. I'll survive. Emily blinked in surprise. The Daniel she'd seen in the office was sharp, intimidating, and all business. But the way he looked at Jacob, there was something different in his eyes. Something she couldn't quite place. From that moment, Jacob and Daniel formed an unlikely connection. At every event that followed, Jacob would find a reason to wander near Daniel, whether to ask questions about his fancy watch, share a story about school, or simply stand next to him as if sensing a hidden protector. And surprisingly, Daniel welcomed it. He listened, he answered, and without realizing it, he began to look forward to those little interactions. Emily noticed, too. She saw how her son lit up when Daniel was around, and how Daniel's guarded demeanor seemed to soften in Jacob's presence. It was confusing for her. She had promised herself to keep her distance from people like Daniel, wealthy men who lived in a world so far from hers. Yet watching her son bond with him stirred something she didn't expect: gratitude, and maybe, just maybe, hope. Still, she kept her guard up. She told herself, don't get comfortable. Don't let him in. People like him don't stay in your world. But deep down, Emily knew something was changing. And Daniel knew it too. Because this was no longer just about a charity project. This was about something more, a connection neither of them had seen coming. But what happens when Daniel starts spending more time around Emily and Jacob outside of work? What will he discover about her life, the struggles she hides so well, and the strength that carries her through every day? The bond between them is only beginning, and it's about to grow deeper than any of them imagined. As the weeks went by, what started as a professional arrangement slowly became something much more personal. Daniel found himself drawn not just to Emily's efficiency, but to the way she carried herself when no one was watching. She didn't complain, even when she stayed late to finish a task. She never asked for favors, even when it was clear she was exhausted. And somehow, she still found energy to smile at the volunteers, encourage her son with his homework, and remind everyone around her that their work truly mattered. It was in the small, quiet moments that Daniel began to notice the things about Emily that most people overlooked. Like the way she always packed an extra sandwich in her bag, just in case one of the kids at the event forgot theirs. Or how she knew exactly how to calm a nervous teenager who was too shy to speak in front of a group. Or even how, despite juggling 2 jobs, she still managed to pick up Jacob from school every single day, never letting him feel like he was second to anything. For a man like Daniel, whose life was filled with meetings, luxury, and walls built high around his emotions, it was like stepping into a world he had never known before. A world where love wasn't measured in money, but in sacrifice. Where success wasn't about the next deal, but about showing up, day after day, for the people who depended on you. And slowly, something began to shift inside him. One late evening, as the charity team wrapped up another long day, Daniel noticed Emily lingering behind, gathering leftover supplies. Everyone else had already left, but there she was, tired eyes, worn-out shoes, yet still making sure nothing went to waste. He walked over, almost hesitantly, and said, "You don't always have to be the last one to leave, you know." Emily looked up, a little startled. "Someone has to make sure everything's ready for tomorrow," she replied softly. Daniel studied her for a moment. For the first time, he wasn't seeing her as just an employee. He was seeing her as a woman, someone strong, yes, but also someone carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. "You remind me of someone," he said finally. "Someone who never gave up, no matter how much was on their plate." Emily tilted her head. "Who?" Daniel hesitated, then gave a small, almost vulnerable smile. "My mother." It was the first time he had opened up about something personal, and the admission caught Emily off guard. She realized that beneath the sharp suit and intimidating presence was a man who had his own history, his own scars. For just a moment, the walls between them cracked. But Emily quickly reminded herself of the distance she needed to keep. She wasn't about to let her world get entangled with someone like Daniel Pierce. Not when her life was already complicated enough. Still, fate had other plans. Because as Daniel spent more time around Emily, he inevitably spent more time around Jacob. And Jacob, in his innocent way, broke through Daniel's walls faster than any adult ever could. Whether it was showing Daniel his favorite comic book, asking him endless questions about his fancy car, or simply sitting beside him during lunch, Jacob treated Daniel like a regular person. Not a billionaire CEO, not a man to be feared, but just someone he liked. And surprisingly, Daniel liked it too. For the first time in years, he felt like he belonged. Not in a boardroom, not in a penthouse apartment, but right there, sitting on a park bench with an 8-year-old boy who looked up at him with trust in his eyes. Emily noticed it, and though part of her was grateful, another part was afraid. Because she knew how fragile stability could be. She had built her world carefully around Jacob, shielding him from disappointment and pain. And the idea of letting someone like Daniel into that world terrified her. But even with her guard up, she couldn't deny what was happening. Piece by piece, their lives were intertwining. And with every passing day, Daniel was inching closer to discovering the truth about Emily, the truth she had kept hidden for years. What exactly was Emily hiding? And what would happen when Daniel uncovered the sacrifice she made, the dream she gave up, all for the sake of her son? That truth was about to surface, and it would change everything. For Daniel, spending time with Emily and Jacob felt like stepping into a different world. A world where laughter came from burnt pancakes on a Saturday morning, where a child's smile mattered more than a bottom line, and where sacrifice was woven into every decision a parent made. But there was still something about Emily he couldn't quite figure out. She was intelligent, clearly more capable than the average person he'd hired for short-term work. She had a calmness under pressure, a sharpness in solving problems, and a natural ability to care for people in a way that was almost professional. And yet, her resume had only shown basic jobs: retail, diner shifts, cashier work. One evening, after a long day at the charity project, Daniel noticed Emily left behind a worn leather folder. Out of habit, he picked it up to keep it safe until she returned. But when it fell open slightly, a set of papers slipped out. He froze. They weren't bills or casual notes. They were transcripts. Medical textbooks with highlighted notes. A faded student ID, and a certificate of academic excellence, awarded to Emily Carter, nursing student. Daniel's eyes widened. Emily had once been a nursing student? And not just any student, she had been top of her class. Later that night, curiosity gnawed at him. He asked his assistant to pull up her file, just the basic records, nothing invasive. What he discovered left him stunned. Emily had been on track to become a pediatric nurse, with glowing recommendations and a bright future. But then, suddenly, during her second year of nursing school, she dropped out. No explanations. No trail. Just gone. The next day, Daniel couldn't hold back anymore. As they wrapped up their shift, he gently approached her. "I came across something yesterday. Your folder," he began carefully. "You were in nursing school?" Emily stiffened. She hadn't expected anyone, least of all Daniel, to bring this up. "That was a long time ago," she said quickly, her voice low, almost defensive. Daniel frowned. "But you were at the top of your class. Why would you walk away from that?" Her hands tightened around the papers she had just gathered. For a moment, she looked like she might shut down completely. But then, something in Daniel's eyes, his genuine curiosity, his unexpected gentleness, broke through her defenses. She took a deep breath. And for the first time, she told him the truth. When Jacob was just a toddler, he got very sick. We spent weeks in the hospital. The treatments were expensive, and I couldn't balance clinical hours with being by his side. So I dropped out. I took whatever jobs I could, waitressing, stocking shelves, cleaning offices, anything that would pay the bills and keep him alive. And I never looked back. Because he needed me more than I needed that degree. Her voice cracked, but she quickly straightened, determined not to show too much vulnerability. "I never told Jacob any of this. He thinks I just wanted to work. He doesn't need to grow up feeling like he cost me something. I want him to believe that he was always enough. Because he is." Daniel stood there in silence, his chest tightening. He had heard countless business stories of sacrifice. Entrepreneurs who mortgaged their homes, investors who took risks. But this was different. This was sacrifice born of love. A kind of love that gave everything and expected nothing in return. For the first time in his life, Daniel Pierce felt humbled. Truly humbled. Emily quickly gathered her things, embarrassed by her own vulnerability. She muttered, "Anyway, it doesn't matter now. That was another life. This is the one I chose." And with that, she walked away, leaving Daniel standing there, shaken to his core. That night, Daniel sat in his penthouse, staring at the city lights. But all he could see was Emily's face when she said, "He doesn't need to grow up feeling like he cost me something." And for the first time, the billionaire CEO who had everything wondered if he had been chasing the wrong kind of success his whole life. But what would Daniel do with this revelation? How would a man who built his world on power and wealth respond to a woman who built hers on sacrifice and love? The answer would set him on a path he never expected, one that would change both their lives forever. That night, Daniel Pierce sat alone in his penthouse apartment. The floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline, glittering with lights that most people only dreamed of seeing from above. Yet for the first time in years, the view felt meaningless. He had everything. The fortune, the cars, the recognition. But as he stared out at the city, all he could think about was a single mother sitting at her kitchen table, probably counting every dollar to make sure her son had what he needed for the week. He remembered her words, "He doesn't need to grow up feeling like he cost me something. I want him to believe he was always enough." Those words echoed in his mind like a truth he had never confronted before. All his life, Daniel believed success was about never compromising, never sacrificing your goals for anyone. He prided himself on being relentless. But Emily had given him a glimpse of something he couldn't ignore. She had chosen love over ambition, her child over her career. And instead of bitterness, she carried it with dignity. She didn't flaunt her sacrifice. She didn't complain. She simply lived it. And for Daniel, that realization cut deep. Because suddenly his own life felt empty. He thought back to his relationships, if he could even call them that. Women who admired his wealth but never truly saw him. Friends who stuck around for the perks but vanished when things got tough. And then he thought of Emily, who had stood up for a stranger without hesitation, who had given up her dream without regret, who had quietly carried burdens that would break most people. For the first time, Daniel began to question everything. Was he really living? Or was he just existing in a golden cage, surrounded by things that meant nothing when compared to the richness of Emily's love for her son? The next day, Daniel found himself distracted in meetings. Numbers blurred on spreadsheets. Investors' voices droned on, but none of it seemed to matter. What mattered was the truth he had uncovered, and the feeling it stirred in him. That evening, he sought out Emily after the project wrapped up. She was gathering materials, as always, her hair pulled back, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. But when Daniel looked at her this time, he didn't just see an employee. He saw a woman who had taught him more in one conversation than years of business had ever done. "Emily," he began carefully, his tone softer than usual, "I keep thinking about what you told me. About your son. About nursing school." Emily froze for a moment, then looked away. "I told you that was a long time ago. It doesn't matter anymore." But Daniel shook his head. "It does matter. It matters because it shows me something I never understood before. You gave up your dreams so your son could live his. That's the kind of strength money can't buy. And it's something I've been blind to my entire life." Emily's eyes flickered with a mixture of surprise and unease. She wasn't used to being seen, not like this. She wasn't used to a man of his stature speaking with such vulnerability. Daniel continued, his voice almost breaking. "You've shown me what sacrifice really looks like. And it made me realize all the success in the world means nothing if you don't have someone to share it with. If you don't have love, respect, family. I've spent years building an empire, but I've never built a life worth living. Not like you." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Emily's heart ached because she could hear the sincerity in his words, but her instincts screamed to keep her distance. She had built walls for a reason, to protect Jacob and to protect herself. So she took a step back and whispered, "Daniel, I appreciate what you're saying, but please don't mistake my life for something noble. I just did what any mother would do." But Daniel knew better. Not every mother could give up so much and carry it with such grace. And in that moment, he made a silent vow. If there was anything he could do to give Emily back even a piece of her dream, he would do it. Because this awakening wasn't just about admiration anymore. It was about action. But how could Daniel help Emily without making her feel like it was pity? How could he offer her a second chance without offending the very dignity he admired? His decision would test not only her trust, but his own ability to change. 4 days after that conversation, Daniel wrestled with himself. He wanted to help Emily. He wanted to do something that would honor her sacrifice and give her a chance to reclaim the dream she had buried years ago. But how? He knew Emily well enough by now to understand one thing clearly. She hated pity. She didn't want handouts. She didn't want charity. She wanted to stand on her own 2 feet, even if it meant carrying more than her fair share of burdens. So if he was going to help her, it had to be done in a way that uplifted her, not diminished her. After long nights of thinking, Daniel finally found the answer. His company already funded a foundation dedicated to community growth and education. He had signed the papers years ago but never involved himself in the details. For him, it had always been just another philanthropic checkbox. But now, it could be something more. One afternoon, after the charity event wrapped up, Daniel asked Emily to stay behind. She looked nervous, uncertain of why he wanted to talk privately. "Emily," he started gently, "I've been thinking about what you told me. About nursing school. About the sacrifices you made." She sighed, already bracing herself. "Daniel, please. I don't want you to feel sorry for me. I don't need saving." He raised his hand slightly, stopping her. "This isn't about saving you. It's about believing in you. I think you still have that gift. The gift to heal, to care, to change lives. And I don't want the world to miss out on that just because life forced you to put it on hold." Emily shook her head, her voice trembling. "Daniel, I can't just go back. Nursing school costs money. Jacob still needs me. It's impossible." Daniel leaned forward, his voice calm but filled with conviction. "What if it wasn't impossible? What if I told you that my company has a foundation that funds education for people exactly like you, people who deserve a second chance? And what if I told you, I want to nominate you?" Her eyes widened, and she stepped back as if the very idea was too heavy to hold. No, Daniel. I can't accept that. It would feel like charity. Like I'm taking advantage." Daniel's voice softened even more. "Emily, listen to me. This isn't about charity. This is about investing in someone who has already proven she's extraordinary. You're not taking advantage. You're earning it every single day with the way you live, the way you fight, the way you love your son. The world needs more nurses like you. Jacob needs to see that his mother's dream didn't have to end. Please, let this foundation be your chance." Emily's eyes filled with tears. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. No one had ever seen her worth so clearly. She wanted to believe him, but fear held her back. Fear of failing. Fear of Jacob seeing her stumble. Fear of letting someone like Daniel too close to the life she had worked so hard to protect. But then she heard a small voice behind her. "Mom." It was Jacob, clutching his backpack, looking up at her with those wide, innocent eyes. "Is he saying you could be a nurse again?" Emily swallowed hard, her heart pounding. She knelt down to face her son. "Jacob, honeys, it's not that simple." But Jacob's face lit up with excitement. "But Mom, you've always been the one taking care of me when I'm sick. You'd be the best nurse in the whole world. You always told me to never give up on what I want. Doesn't that mean you shouldn't give up either?" Emily's breath caught in her throat. Out of the mouths of children came the very truth she had tried so hard to ignore. Daniel watched quietly, his chest tightening at the sight. This wasn't about him convincing her. It was about her son reminding her of who she truly was. Finally, Emily stood, her eyes glistening. She turned to Daniel and whispered, "I don't know if I can do this. I'll try. For him." Daniel nodded, his voice firm but warm. "That's all I ask. Just try. And I'll be here every step of the way." For the first time, Emily allowed herself to trust him, just a little. And for Daniel, it wasn't just about helping her anymore. It was about becoming the kind of man who deserved that trust. But what happens when trust begins to turn into something more? When admiration becomes affection and walls begin to crumble? Daniel and Emily's journey was no longer just about a career or a second chance. It was about opening their hearts. And neither of them was prepared for what came next. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Emily had ever known. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was walking this journey alone. Daniel didn't just set the wheels in motion for her to begin nursing school. He made sure she had the support system she needed. Evening classes that fit around her work schedule. Childcare support for Jacob. Study resources. A quiet place to learn. But most of all, he gave her encouragement. Every morning, there was a small gesture. A handwritten note left at her desk, a fresh cup of coffee waiting for her, or a simple text that read, "You're stronger than you think." At first, Emily didn't know how to accept it. She had spent years building walls to protect herself from disappointment, from false promises, from leaning on anyone but herself. But slowly, carefully, those walls began to crack. One night, after putting Jacob to bed, Emily sat at the kitchen table with her textbooks spread out before her. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the pages, fear whispering that she wasn't smart enough anymore, that she had been out of school too long. Her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "How's the studying going? Remember, progress, not perfection. You've got this." Emily smiled despite the tears in her eyes. She typed back, "I'm terrified. What if I fail?" His reply came instantly. "Then you fail forward. That's how real success happens. I believe in you, Emily. More than you believe in yourself." She set the phone down and pressed a hand to her chest. She had never realized how much she needed to hear those words, not from anyone, but from someone who truly saw her. Jacob, too, was changing. He would come home from school, sit beside his mother, and pretend to study with her. He drew little pictures of her wearing a nurse's uniform with a stethoscope around her neck. Each picture had the same caption, written in his uneven handwriting, "Mom, the hero." One evening, Daniel joined them for dinner. Jacob insisted he stay, tugging at his arm until he finally gave in. The three of them sat around the small wooden table, laughter filling the air in a way Emily hadn't experienced in years. Daniel watched as Jacob told a silly story about his teacher, his hands flailing with excitement, his mother giggling until tears rolled down her cheeks. And in that moment, Daniel realized something he hadn't expected. He wasn't just investing in Emily's dream, he was becoming part of something far more precious. A family. As he drove home that night, the city lights blurring past his window, Daniel's thoughts refused to settle. For so long, his life had been about business deals, boardrooms, and bottom lines. Yet now, what mattered most was a single mother and her little boy. It terrified him, because for the first time in years, he had something to lose. Back at her apartment, Emily tucked Jacob into bed. He looked up at her sleepily and whispered, "Mom, are you happy again?" Her breath caught. She kissed his forehead softly. "Yes, baby, I think I am." But when she turned off the light and stood by the window, her mind swirled with emotions she could barely understand. Gratitude, admiration, fear, and something deeper. Something she hadn't let herself feel since Jacob's father walked away. Hope that maybe, just maybe, her story wasn't finished yet. And yet, hope could be dangerous. Because Emily wasn't the only one carrying secrets. Daniel's world was far more complicated than he let on. And just as their hearts began to open, a storm was waiting on the horizon, one that could test everything they were building together. As Emily prepared for her first big step back into the world of nursing, an unexpected shadow appeared, threatening not just his reputation, but the fragile trust and hope they had only just begun to build. Emily's journey back into nursing was not easy. Every morning began before sunrise. She would pack Jacob's lunch, drop him off at school, work her daytime shift at the charity office, then head straight to evening classes. The long nights of studying left her drained, but she never gave up. And every time she thought of quitting, Jacob's smile and Daniel's unwavering encouragement pushed her forward. But just as things seemed to fall into place, an obstacle arose. One chilly evening, Emily arrived at class only to be met with whispers in the hallway. A tabloid article had surfaced, splashed across the internet. Billionaire Shocked funds single mom's dream, but at what cost? The piece painted Emily as a charity case, insinuating she was only succeeding because of Daniel's money, not her own hard work. Emily's face burned as she read the cruel words. Students glanced at her, some with sympathy, others with quiet judgment. That night, she barely heard a word of the lecture. All she could think was, is this how people will always see me? When she got home, she confronted Daniel. Why didn't you tell me this could happen? I don't want to be your project. I've worked too hard for people to think I'm just some woman you rescued. Daniel's jaw tightened. He hated that his world, his wealth, his fame, was bleeding into hers. Emily, I never saw you that way. You're not my project. You're my inspiration. But yes, this is the price of my name. And I should have prepared you for it. Her eyes filled with tears, torn between gratitude and fear. I can't let Jacob grow up thinking I only got this far because someone took pity on me. I need to know I earned it. Daniel stepped closer, his voice steady, sincere. Then show them. Prove every word wrong. Not for me, not for the tabloids, but for yourself. Emily, you've already done the hardest part. You sacrificed everything for Jacob. The rest? The rest is just noise. Emily stared at him, heart racing. For the first time, she realized he didn't just believe in her dream. He believed in her. Months passed. And slowly, the noise faded. Emily aced her exams, not because of Daniel's help, but because of her own grit. Her professors admired her discipline. Her classmates leaned on her kindness. And when she walked across the stage at graduation, Jacob was in the front row, cheering so loud the entire auditorium turned to smile. "Go, Mom!" he shouted, his little voice echoing through the hall. Emily's eyes filled as she clutched her diploma. She had done it. Not alone, but not carried either. She had earned this. After the ceremony, Jacob ran into her arms, holding out another drawing. This time, it was her in a nurse's uniform, standing beside Daniel. Above their heads were the words, in his uneven handwriting, "My heroes." Emily looked up at Daniel, who was watching them with quiet pride. Her voice trembled. "You know, I thought I lost my chance at this life. But maybe I just needed the right people beside me." Daniel smiled, his eyes softer than she had ever seen. "Emily, you gave up your dreams so your son could live his. That's the kind of strength money can't buy. And now, you've proven to everyone, including yourself, that nothing can stop you." She swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling deep in her heart. For years, she had carried guilt, believing she had lost everything. But now, standing there with Jacob in her arms and Daniel at her side, she realized something beautiful. She hadn't lost her dream. She had delayed it. And in the process, she had gained something even greater. Family. Weeks later, Emily officially began working as a pediatric nurse, her compassion shining through in every patient she cared for. She wasn't just treating illnesses, she was offering hope, the same hope she had once fought so hard to give her son. And Daniel? He didn't swoop in as a savior. He stood beside her as a partner, someone who admired her strength more than anything else. Slowly, their connection deepened, not rushed, not forced, but built on respect, trust, and sacrifice. One evening, as the sun set behind the city skyline, Emily, Daniel, and Jacob walked together through the park. Jacob held both their hands, swinging between them, his laughter carrying in the cool evening air. And in that simple moment, without wealth, without status, without anything but love, they felt complete. Not a fairy tale. Not perfection. But a new beginning. Because sometimes the most powerful stories aren't about what you gain, but about what you're willing to give up, and the people who help you find your way back again. And so, Emily's hidden sacrifice didn't end with loss. It became the very thing that opened the door to her second chance, at her career, at love, and at family. A reminder to us all that when life forces us to choose, love is never wasted. Sometimes, it simply delays the dream until the right moment arrives. Moral of this story, in life, true strength isn't measured by wealth, power, or status. It's measured by the sacrifices we make for the ones we love. Emily gave up her dream so her son could live his, But in the end, that sacrifice became the bridge to her second chance. Love and resilience will always open doors that money never can. And when we support others instead of judging them, we may just change not only their life, but our own. Remember, you never really know the struggles someone is silently carrying. Always lead with kindness, compassion, and belief in others, because your encouragement could be the very thing that helps them rise again. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so we can keep bringing you more inspiring stories. And remember, we're not just telling stories, we're changing lives.